It's on.
Welcome everybody to our Bible study, and we're going to have another, hopefully another good Bible study like we had last week. We're kind of stuck in this season of wondering what God's doing, wondering how God's going to move, and feeling like God's not moving. And so hopefully we can get something out of this. And as long as God gives me these messages, I'm going to do Bible studies with them. So we're going to talk about Elijah today. And if you've not read about Elijah, well, what can I say? You really need to just sit down and read it. It's a wonderful story, and it just never ends. And I had to stop at a point, and I hope that my stopping point doesn't confuse anybody, but if I could have read like 8 or 9 chapters. So we're going to start in the book of James. And in the book of James, it says, in verse number 17 and 18 of chapter 5, it said, Elias, which is Elijah, was a man subject to like passions as we are. In other words, they're saying that Elijah was just like us. Mm-hmm. He was just like us. He had fears, he had wants, he had likes, he had all of these things. But there was one thing different about Elijah. It says, and he prayed earnestly. Which means he prayed and he prayed and he prayed, and when he prayed, he believed it. When he prayed, he had the faith to know that God was going to do it. And it said that he prayed earnestly that it might not rain. And it did not, and it rained not on the earth by a space of 3 years and 6 months. Think about that for a minute. We wouldn't have to worry about the water in the backyard if it didn't rain for 3 years and 6 months, would we? And it said, and then he prayed again, and heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Now we're going to talk about Elijah a little bit, and I want you to understand that Elijah was a prophet of God. God talked to Elijah. Now think about this for a minute. God talked to Elijah, and when God speaks to us, and God says things to us, we feel pretty good. We feel pretty good. Hopefully, we don't feel like we're better than anybody else. Hopefully, we don't feel like that we got this thing going with God that nobody else can have. But it makes us feel really good. And I want you to think about that today. I want you to think about how you would feel if you were in Elijah's shoes. And we're going to go to the book of Kings. This is going to be very easy for you that are following along because we're going to read 1 Kings chapter 17, 18, and 19. So it's going to be real. I'm going to be jumping around today. And it's right on the screen. Hopefully you can see it. The book of 1 Kings chapter 17, starting in verse number 1. This is, of course, Old Testament. And Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, and Ahab is the king of Israel, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, 42 months, a year and 6 months, 3 years and 6 months, according to my word. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, talking to Elisha, get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. See, God had work. Could you imagine? Elijah came up to Ahab and said, listen, I'm going to tell it when it's going to stop raining, and it's not going to rain for 3.5 years, and then I'm going to speak again, and it's going to rain again. Could you imagine? Now think about this for a minute. The king was the king over everything in Israel. He was the one that took taxes, that made laws, that did all of these things. And he had some guy walk up to him and say, listen, by my word, it's not going to rain for 3.5 years. The king who thinks he's all-powerful and almighty couldn't do that. There are going to be people, hundreds of thousands of people coming to the king saying, it's not raining, we're going to die, all of our cattle's going to die, all of our sheep are going to die, all of the grass is going to die, we're going to die. And the king can't do anything about it. And God told Elijah, go to the king and tell him, by your word, it's not going to rain. Because God had to get somebody's attention. And as soon as Elijah told Ahab that, God told him, go hide yourself. Could you imagine? Why do you think he told Elijah here in verse 3? He said, get thee hence and turn thee eastward and hide thyself by the brook Cherith, which is before Jordan. Why on earth do you think that would happen? Why do you think so?
So he's saved from the rain?
So he's saved from the people. Ahab probably, what Ahab probably would have tried to do is to probably try to kill him, because if he killed him, maybe it would start raining again. And it says in verse number 4, as we read on in this, it says, and it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. So I want you to get this. God told Elijah to go do something for him. And how did God reward Elijah? He told him to go live in a cave, and a bird was going to feed him, and he was going to have to drink out of a brook. I want you to think about that for a minute. Let me keep reading here. In verse number 5, it says, and he went and he did according to the word of the Lord, for he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning, and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. There are times when you guys can't sit in your room for 10 minutes without saying, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. But understand that for a long period of time, God said, Elijah, go do it. And he did it. And he stayed in this cave, and he drank from the brook, and he had birds bringing him food.
They weren't regurgitating, right?
I have no idea, Lindsay. And it came to pass, after a while, that the brook dried up. Why? Because it hadn't rained.
Oh no.
Because there had been no rain in the land. Now I want you to get this. I want you to think about Elijah here for a minute. He did what God told him to do. Mm-hmm. Don't you think, it doesn't say, but it said he had like passions. Don't you think he'd sit there in his mind and thought, well, if I do that, then what am I going to do? What am my family going to do? What about my loved ones? What's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to all my friends, all my neighbors? God, what are you doing? And then he sends Elijah all by himself. And he said, listen, I'm going to sustain you. I'm going to feed you. And then the brook dries up. I know. Let me read here. See, sometimes, church, when we're doing God's will, bad things happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about it, if it doesn't rain, that brook was going to dry up. Unless God sustained it and kept it going. But God didn't. You know why God didn't? Because God had something for Elijah to do. He had something for him to do. So he kept him there for a little while. What he's doing, church, is he's building his faith up. He's building his faith. He said, I'm going to sustain you. This is not what you want. This is not even close to what you want. And with Elijah having like passions, he probably thought, God, why did you do this to me? Mm-hmm. Why did you have to do this? Why did I have to be the messenger? Now everybody else is going to die out there, and I may die in this cave. Who knows what he was thinking?
Well, isn't there supposed to be water in a cave?
Not if it hasn't rained for 3.5 years. And the word of the Lord came into him, saying, Arise, it's time to get away. Get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded, I want you to remember that, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain you. So he's saying, listen, you're done. I want you to understand. God said, I have commanded this widow woman to feed you, to sustain you, to give you something to drink. You see, God's not finished with Elijah.
Mm-mm.
God's got things to do for Elijah. This is not what Elisha wanted. Elisha probably wanted to stay back with his friends and families and live the life that he lived, even though he was a prophet. But God had to shake things up a little bit. God had to move him out because Elijah was the only person that was willing to do what God told him to do. It doesn't say this in the Bible, but what happens if Elijah wasn't the first person God asked to go tell Ahab that? Elijah was willing to do it at all costs. He didn't care the consequences. He didn't care what the outcome was. So he arose and went to Zarephath. Let me scroll up here. He rose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there, gathering of sticks, and he called for her. And he said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, And by the way, not only am I thirsty, bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. Now let's think about that for a minute. Don't you think that's kind of interesting? I'm going to stop there for just a second. This really doesn't have anything to do with the Bible study, but it just came to me. He told the widow woman to bring it in her hand. Can you imagine how bad he was tired? I don't know if you know this or not, but birds don't have hands. Imagine how the birds were feeding Elijah. How do you think? With their beaks? And Elijah said, Listen, I'm done with this bread and this flesh and this food from the ravens from their mouth. He said, bring it to me in your hand. Okay? Because there's no telling what he went through. And it doesn't really bear out, and if it does, I didn't read that deeply into it. It doesn't bear out how long the period of time was between when it stopped raining and when this period of time was. But you could just imagine how long it would take for a brook to dry up. Imagine if he went a year being fed by the ravens. Now he's saying, listen, I want you to bring me some food. Put it in your hand. She probably thought he was a weirdo, like saying, well, where else am I going to put it? And she said, As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat and die. What did God tell Elijah would happen when he got to the place?
She would give him.
Yeah. God said, I commanded her.
Mm-hmm.
But what is she saying? She goes, I got nothing for you.
Mm-hmm. So then I was like, what?
See, God did command her. She just didn't know it yet.
Right.
Because I want you to go back, and this is very important. I want you to go back to verse number 14. And what is the first thing she says in verse number 14? As she said, As the Lord thy God liveth. God had set up something with this widow woman to make her, to give her faith, to believe when the prophet said do this and do that she was going to do it. God had already put it into place. God had already set it in her heart to have enough faith to do these things. She just didn't know it yet. Let's keep reading. We are at verse number, I can't read it with my glasses. 12?
I think 10. No, 12, yeah.
And Elijah said unto her in verse number 13, Fear not. Go and do as thou hast said. But make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it to me, and after that make for thee and thy son. Now remember what she said? She said, listen, I got a little bit of morsel left, a little bit of grain, and basically I'm going to give some to me, some to my son, and we're just going to wait around to die. And you know what Elisha said? He goes, okay, no problem. Go ahead and do that. But before you do that, before you go off and die, before you give a little bit for you and your son, make me a cake like I asked you to. She can't do it, but God can do it. And then in the next verse, it says, "For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste." In other words, remember the fishes and the bread that Jesus fed all the 5,000 people? It never went away. It was just always there. Mm-hmm. That's what Elijah's saying. He's saying, listen, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail, until the day that the Lord sends rain back on the earth. He's saying, listen, you do what I asked you to do, and you feed me first, you're going to have enough food to last you until it starts raining again.
Wow.
And she went, and she did, according to the saying of Elijah. Because God commanded it. Because God commanded her to do it. He had gotten her ready. Because if someone were to say right now that we're all going to get up and we're not doing this, but we're all going to get up and leave and we're going to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
No.
Right now we're saying no. But you know what? If that's what God wants out of this family, that's what God will do, and God will get us ready and get us to the point where we're willing to do whatever. Because at this point, this lady had no choice. She was going to die anyway, her son was going to die anyway, and she had a little bit of faith to think that Elijah was a prophet of God and that she was going to be saved. And she went and did according to the saying of Elijah. And she and her son, and our house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. Now, let me tell you something. God's not done with Elijah yet. God's not done. This whole exercise in faith, this whole exercise in not knowing what's happening next, but you have to have faith in God, this whole thing was for things that were going to happen later on. This has really nothing to do, but God has to build your faith up and build your faith up and build your faith up and build your faith up to get you ready to do the things that He wants you to do. And it came to pass after these things that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick. And his sickness was so sore that he had no breath left in him. What does that mean? Anybody can tell me what that means? He died.
I thought they were in the condo.
I know. Exactly. Think about when God says something, when God speaks, when there's a Bible study, and God says, you're going to be okay. But understand, God can do anything. God can do anything. Now let's see what happens. See, if God tells you to do something, He will always provide a way to get you through it, no matter what. Think about this for a second. While God is sustaining us and keeping us, we need to be looking for what God wants from us. Because right now, even though, in the course of this lady and her son, we're a lot better off, but a lot of times we feel like God's just kind of sustaining us. God's just kind of giving us a little morsel, a little cruse of oil, a little morsel of bread, a little bit of grain, just to sustain us, because He's got to get everything into place for what His plan is and what He is going to do. And it came to pass after these things, the son fell sick. And she said to Elijah, what do I have to do with thee, O thou man of God? Because now she knows he's a man of God. That thou come into art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay my son? There it is. Think about this for a minute. She did what God wanted.
Right.
And look what happened. Her son died. Don't we feel that way sometimes?
Yep.
We look at bad things and wonder why God is punishing us. We remember something we had done and think, God, is this how you're getting back at me? Devil jumps up on that little shoulder and says, remember that, what you did 2 weeks ago?
Or you say, well, you did this before, why aren't you doing it now? Mm-hmm.
Maybe God is just wanting us to pray
Mm-hmm.
and reach out to him like this lady did to Elijah. Because you know what? Her son was going to die. Her son was going to die. God knew her son was going to die. But Elijah didn't go there because her son was going to die. He went there to show that lady miracles so she would go to him and pray to God for her son to live. God had to do a little bit here, and a little bit here, and a little bit here, because the son was going to die. God had to do that. And he said to her, "Give me thy son." And he took him out of her bosom, and carried him up to the loft where he abode, and laid him upon his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again. And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came into him again, and he revived. God knew it all along. You know, like I said, that's why he sent Elijah there in the first place. Now, we're not going to hear anything else about this woman. But we're going to hear a lot about Elijah. No, because the story's over. Because God had to do this to build up Elijah's faith. Because God's not finished with him yet. God's got something for him to do that's 1,000 times more important than what he's done so far. Now let me read. Let me keep reading here. And Elijah took the child and brought him into the chamber, into the house, and delivered him into his mother. And Elijah said, See, look what the Lord has done. Your son liveth. Mm-hmm. And the woman said to Elijah, But now, by this I know that thou art a man of God, and that word of the Lord is in thy mouth is truth.
Mm-hmm.
See? Had God not built up Elijah's faith and had him go to the woman's house to sustain her and her son, she would have never went to him to heal her son. Think about this for just a second. Think about this. 3 different things had to happen before he could do a miracle for the lady. 3 miracles. Elijah had to be fed by ravens. Elijah had to pray that the rain would stop. He had to be fed by ravens. And he had to pray over the food that it would never go away. Mm-hmm. 3 things before he could heal this child.
Right.
Because of the faith. Because the faith had to be built up. You never know when your obedience, with someone will help someone else. You never know. You never know these things. You never know when your faith will encourage someone else. And that's nothing compared to what God's about to do through Elijah. Sorry, I keep saying Elijah. Kings 18. And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go, show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. Now remember, it didn't rain for 3.5 years. So we're still looking at 3 years. We're still looking at another 6 months before it rains. Think about that. Think about the type of faith. First, Elijah had to go to the king and say, it's going to not rain. And we all know, what did Elijah do as soon as he told the king it's not going to rain for 3 years? What did he do?
He hid himself by a brook.
He hid himself in a cave by a brook because
the people were going to come and
kill him. Now God said, listen, all those people, imagine being public enemy number 1. Imagine everybody in all of Israel knows that you're the reason it isn't raining, and you have to go back to the king and tell him it's going to rain again.
Yep.
Think about that. Think about the things that God has us to do, and there's always a reason for it.
And he had to hide too, if you think about that.
Yeah.
He had to hide. God didn't really, he wasn't going to be protected out in the open.
No.
He had to hide away, and I've never looked at it that way. That's kind of sad.
And Elijah went to show himself to Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. There's a famine. If it doesn't rain, people are not going to eat. Because you can't go down to Marsh, you can't go, well, you can't go anywhere to Marsh now. You can't go to Walmart, you can't go to Meijer and get food. There was none of that stuff back then.
Wow.
They slaughtered their animals and they ate them. They had crops and they ate them.
And now they run.
And there's no rain, the crops are going to die.
Yeah.
And the animals are going to die because they can't eat the grass.
Right. See, God's not finished with Elijah yet. And Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house. Now, Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. That's very important. For it was so when Jezebel, which is Ahab's wife, cut off the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water.
Wow. Man. He did not.
So exactly what God did for Elijah, Obadiah did for the rest of the prophets. Hid them in a cave, even though they had it better off than Elijah, because they were being fed by humans, not by birds. And Ahab said to Obadiah, because Elijah's not there yet, go into the land, and to all the fountains of the water, and in all the brooks, peradventure, perhaps, we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we lose not all of the beasts. So he's saying, listen, it's time now. We need to be thinking about other people, which is a bad thing for Ahab. We need to go out. We need to save our own skin. We need to save our own animals. So go get some water so we can save some of this. So we can save some of the grass so our animals can eat. Let's keep reading here. So they divided the land between them to pass throughout it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. And as Obadiah was walking down the path, was in the way, here comes Elijah.
Wow.
Elijah met him, and he knew him, and he fell on his face and says, Art thou my Lord Elijah? And he answered him and says, I am. He said,
Just there.
Go and tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here.
Stop.
And he said, What have I sinned? Thou wouldest deliver thy servant into the hand of Ahab to slay me? Elijah said, Listen, go tell Ahab I'm here. I got something to tell him. And he's going, Wait a minute. If I tell him that I saw you and you're alive, he's going to kill me. As the Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation or kingdom whither my Lord hath not sent to seek thee. And when they said, He is not there, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation, and they found thee not. And now you say, Go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here? Now I want you to listen to this next verse, because it's going to hit some of us right here between the eyes. You ready? And it shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from thee, that the Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he can't find you, he will slay me. But I, thy servant, fear the Lord from my youth. In other words, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? It doesn't matter. We can go pray for those people and give them Bible studies till the cows come home. And I believe that God can do it. I believe that there's a God, but He's not gonna. He's not going to do anything. He never has. And as soon as you leave and I go tell Ahab that you're here, you're going to be gone because God's going to take you away. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
I fear God, I love God, but there ain't no way I'm telling Ahab you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Because my faith is shot. Because think about this for a minute. Obadiah was in the middle of the famine. The miracles that God did for Elijah, He didn't do for Obadiah. Now listen to what Elijah said. And now you saith, wait a second here. It says, was it not told, my Lord, what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord and hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water? Hang on just a second.
She's fine. Be quiet.
And now you say to me, go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah here, and he shall even slay me. And Elijah said, as the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself unto him today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Uh-oh. And it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said unto him, aren't you the guy that troubled Israel? Aren't you the guy that said it's not going to rain for 3 years? And Elijah answered, he said, I've not troubled Israel. You did.
Uh-oh.
This is what it's all about right here. The old lady, the cruse of oil, all that stuff is for this point right here. It says, I have not troubled Israel, but thou, and thou father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and you have followed Baal. Now think about this for just a second. Think about this for a second. Watch me. Look at me. God, there were people in Israel praying and crying out to God, saying, come and save us.
Go put her in the sunroom.
Come and save us. Come and do these things. Because all of Israel, all of America is. I'm going to pause for just a second. Ahab went to Elijah and said, you're the one that's troubling Israel. You're the one that's causing it not to rain. And Elijah says, no, it wasn't me, it was you. Because you have decided, as the leader of Israel, you have decided to follow false gods and not the God of this, God. And think about this for just a second. There were people probably praying, just like people are praying in America right now, and they're saying, God, all these false gods, all these things that are going on in the United States of America right now, and people are probably praying. And people are probably wanting to go to the leader and say, this is all your fault. Now therefore send and gather me all of Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table, because she was the problem. And Ahab sent unto the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Okay. Scroll up here. And Elijah came unto all the people and said, how long have you been between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him. And if Baal be God, says it, but if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered not a word. Mm. He was praying. He was preaching to them. Mm-hmm. And now we're sitting there thinking, uh-oh. See, God's not finished with Elijah yet. Then said Elijah to the people, I, even I only, remain a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let them therefore give us 2 bullocks, and let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, and cut it into pieces, and lay it on wood, put no fire under it. And I will dress the other bullock, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire under. And call ye on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and the God that answereth by fire, let him be God. And all the people answered and said, it is well spoken. And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, choose you the 1 bullock for yourselves, and dress it first, for ye are many, and call upon the name of your gods, but put no fire under. And they took the bullock which was given to them, and they dressed it, and they called on the name of Baal from morning, evening, even until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. And there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar that was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is talking, or he is pursuing, or he is in a journey, or perhaps he sleepeth. And you have to yell to wake him up. He was making fun of this false god. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancets, till the blood gushed out of them. And it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied unto the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that there was neither voice, nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. See, that is the problem right there. And we can't do this anymore because everybody's a Christian. Everybody does this. Everybody goes to church. Everybody loves God. Everybody this and that. And you can't walk up to somebody. But what people don't understand is anything that they put before God, anything they put before God.
Right.
Sleep. I'm tired. I don't want to show up to Bible study. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Anything they put before God is an idol. It is a Baal type of God. Anything. I don't care what anybody says. It is. It just is. And you could cry out all you want to your false gods. You could do whatever, but they're never going to answer you. You're never going to be fulfilled in your life until you get serious and get down to where God can use you. Because I am telling you right now, there is nothing better in this world than someone turning their life over to God. And what makes it even better is when you had a hand in it. Mm-hmm. And imagine how Elijah felt. How Elijah felt when that lady said, You are a man of God. I believe in God. Imagine how Elijah felt. He felt like all of this stuff that had happened so far was worth it because someone turned their life over to God. Let's keep going. I'm about done. It's God's not done with Elijah yet. And verse number came to pass, I don't know what verse number that is, too small. 20 maybe. And Elijah said unto the people, Come near unto me. And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. And Elijah said unto the people, I said that already. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, and to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench into the altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. Think about that. Just stop for just a second. Faith, if you have the faith of a
mustard seed.
And he put the wood in order, and he cut the bullock in pieces, and laid him on the wood, and he said, Fill 4 barrels with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood. Now, we all know that if something's wet, it's not going to burn, right? Mm-hmm. Elijah said, let me show you what my God can do. But isn't it funny that he used the very thing that they didn't have a whole lot of because of the drought? Mm-hmm. He said, 4 barrels. Pour it on. Pour it on where the fire's supposed to be. Pour it on there. And he said, do it again. And do it again, a 3rd time. And he said, do it a 3rd time. Do it a 2nd time, and they did it a 2nd time. And he said, do it a 3rd time, and they did it a 3rd time. And listen to this. And the water ran around about the altar, and he filled the trench also with water. Again, he's using the very stuff. That don't you think that everybody's looking around going, wait a minute, we could have used that water to save our lives. We could have used that water for this and that, and he's just wasting it.
Right.
And it came to pass at the time of the offering in the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Lord, Hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and that thou hast turned their heart back again to you. Stop for just a second. And I know we're recording, and I don't care. I want you to get this. I want you to think about this. 7, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't know. We were sitting around in June in this house thinking, what's God going to do next? We turned around, talked to a bunch of people, and started a church in our house. That went on for about 6, 8 months until God gave us a building, which went on for 4 or 5 years, and then God ended it. We walked away from that situation hurt, bitter, angry, confused, wondering what on earth God has done, on top of, everything else that had happened right before we closed the church. Ever since then, there are still people out there that need something from God. There are still people out there that need to return back to God. And for the last few months here, we've been doing these Bible studies. And I'm sure there are people out there that think, what makes them think that's going to do any good? It didn't do any good last time. And we know it did good last time because we're hearing of the testimonies. But what I'm trying to say is, who would have thought that pouring 4, 8, 12 barrels of water on something you're going to catch on fire and then fill the trenches with water, that it's going to do any good? And Elijah did it for one reason. He did it, and it states it right here. It said right here that, hear me, O Lord, that this people may know that you are God, and that you have turned, that they have turned their heart back again. I don't care how much water we have to pour in here. I don't care how much water we have to continually pour, because there are people out there that say, how can you reach people in your little living room? How can you reach people in the same way these people are probably feeling? They're probably feeling, how is this ever going to light on fire as much water as he poured on it? And you know what else? All the time we're spending, all the time we're wasting, all the hours I'm spending on coming up with these Bible studies. People talk about how precious their time is, and how precious, and people are looking just like they looked there and thought about how precious that water was that was being wasted. How precious my time is that is being wasted. I don't want to go there. I don't want to listen to him. I don't want to listen to that. And they're sitting there thinking, why is he wasting his time? It's not going to do any good. And Elijah had the faith to know that the people would turn their hearts back to him, to God. And it says in the very next verse, then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, he is thy God. The Lord, he is thy God. Mm-hmm. It's like when people walk back into the church building after being gone for several months, and they realize, it doesn't matter how many miracles they see. Sometimes they forget when they're not around people of God.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And they walk away. And they don't care anymore. Mm-hmm. Or someone said something to them. I mean, do you understand that Elijah probably did some stuff, said some things out of his mouth? Who knows? I know he was a prophet, but you're going to hear something real soon that's going to prove to you that Elijah's just like us, even though it said it in James that he has like passions. Elijah may have said things to the old woman or to somebody in town, or who knows. People get discouraged. People walk away. But people will never say, well, I'm now worshiping a false god, but you are. We are if we're not giving everything we have to God. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And he took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. And Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is an abundance of rain. Guess what? It ain't rained yet. And Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, nothing. He said, go again 7 times. Don't give up. Be persistent in prayer. Don't let your situation that you're presently in, you understand it still had rain. God said it was going to rain, and it still had rained. And Elijah, who had all these miracles happen, who performed all these miracles, sent somebody to go look for a rain cloud. That person didn't know the miracles. He didn't see the miracles. And he came back discouraged and said, I don't see anything.
Right.
And he said, go back. Do it 7 times.
That's a lot.
And it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, behold, there's a little cloud out of the sea, like of a man's hand. And he said, go up, saying to Ahab, prepare thy chariot, and get thee down there, that the rain stop you not. You know, sometimes we're looking for a miracle from God. We're looking for some big, substantial thing, some big, huge thing. And we miss the blessing because we do not see the small beginnings of what God is trying to do. And it came to pass, in the meanwhile, that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran after Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. I'm almost done. Because God's not finished with Elijah yet. God's still not finished with Elijah. Because there's still work to be done. And let me finish this up. This is the last one we're going to go to. Ahab loved his wife. Sometimes men, we get excited. We tell our wives things. They're not as excited as we are. That kind of brings us down a little bit.
Sorry.
Not this far. Not this far. I'm not calling you the wives Jezebel here. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. He was excited. All the people had returned back to God. And with all, how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a message unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I don't make thy life as the life of them by tomorrow about this time. Jezebel said, I don't care what you've done, because you're hurting me, you're hurting what I was trying to do, and I'm going to do the same thing to you that you did to those prophets. And if not, my gods, because I wasn't there, I still follow Baal.
Is Baal God?
People think that it's okay because they've heard the Bible, because they've heard the messages, that they don't have to be there. But Jezebel wasn't there, and she wasn't buying it. Ahab was all excited because he returned from church, and he was pumped up, and he was excited about all the miracles that God had done. And his wife, he sit there and said, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to send a message to Elijah and tell him that by tomorrow at this time, I'm going to do the same thing to him that he did to my prophets.
Wait, so Baal's a prophet?
Baal's a
false god. That doesn't exist. It's like the golden calf.
What?
And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life. Really?
You didn't trust
After
God?
all that
Yeah.
Elisha had done for God and his people? Heck, I want you to get this. I want you to get this. Elisha preached. He went to church. He performed miracles. He followed God. He turned his people back around, and bad things still happened.
Right.
And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and left his servant there. Now remember, Judah and Israel were separate kingdoms at this time.
Okay. Stop.
But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He should have been the hero. There should have been a parade for him. There should have been confetti and horses and food, and he had to flee. He had just done everything God told him to do, and he had to go into the wilderness. Get it today. And he came and sat down unto a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die.
Yeah. This is Elijah.
It's Elijah.
Oh my goodness.
And he said,
Jupiter?
I've had...
Juniper.
Oh.
Juniper, not Jupiter. And he goes, I've had enough. Anybody been there?
Yep.
It said, it is enough, Lord. Now, O Lord, just take me. Take my life. I've had enough. For I am no better than my fathers. Sometimes we're done.
Right.
Sometimes we're done. Sometimes we want to walk away. Sometimes we want God to take us. Sometimes we just want God to leave us alone.
Yes. True.
And as he lay, God gave him rest. It says, and he lay, he slept under a juniper tree. And behold, then an angel touched him and said unto him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was cake, bacon on the coals, and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink, and he went back to sleep. I want you to think about it.
I thought that was
God's still sustaining him. Is God
God's still
giving
taking care of him.
Is God giving him a party?
No.
Is God giving him everything he ever wanted and
No.
desired?
Nope.
Is God giving him a parade?
Nope.
Is God giving him steak
No.
and potatoes and grapes
No.
and Olive Garden breadsticks? No. And Burrell Feast Pizza King? No. And he put him back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee.
So there's more to come, Elijah.
The best hasn't happened yet. And the angel of the Lord came, and he arose and he did eat and drink, and he went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights into Horeb, the mount of God. And he came thither into a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, and he said unto him, why are you here, Elijah? Now I want to stop for a minute. This is for the adults in the room and in the internet, hopefully. Eventually. Listen, what's it say? He rose and he ate and drank and went in the strength of that meat. How long?
40 days.
40 days. A month and a week and a half, right? 5.5 weeks. Now listen. Now listen. After the 40 days, the Lord spoke to him.
So he had to wait all that time.
He had to wait all that time. And he didn't hear from God.
No.
He didn't know what was going on.
Yep.
He probably thought God left him. He probably thought God forsaken him. He probably thought all these things because God hadn't spoken to him. And he didn't understand why God wasn't answering his prayers.
Right.
And God said, what are you doing in this cave? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, slain thy prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. What do you want from me, God? What on earth do you want from me? I've done everything you've wanted me to do. I've done all of these things. I have preached for you. I have prayed. I have talked to people about you, and now I'm in a cave by myself, and I'm the only one left. What do you
so funny.
Even the strongest break.
Amen. That's the truth.
Could you imagine? Imagine everything that he went through.
Right.
Even the strongest break. And he said, go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. So he went there. The Lord passed by. And a great strong wind rent the mountains and break in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord wasn't in the fire. Because Elisha expected the temper tantrum he just threw. Elisha expected God to move. Elisha expected God to give him everything he ever wanted. Elisha expected to have this big, huge thing happen.
Right.
And it wasn't in the wind. It wasn't in the earthquake. It wasn't in the fire. Well, that's what it says. After the fire was a still, small voice. And it was so, when Elisha heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle, and he went out and stood in the entering of the cave. And behold, there came a voice unto him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? I still have work for you to do, Elisha. Why are you still here? And he said, I have been very jealous of the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken the covenant, thrown down altars, and slain the prophets by the sword, and I, even I, am the only one left, and they seek my wife to take it away. And the Lord said unto him, go, return on the way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when thou shalt comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. He said, I ain't done with you yet. Now you're going to make a new king in Syria. You're going to anoint them. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel, shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. Now I want to tell you something. Are you ready? Are you ready for the climax of this? God told Elijah that you are going to, let me scroll down so you can see what it says. He told Elisha that you're going to make Hazael the king of Assyria, and Jehu is going to be the king over Israel, and Elisha is going to be your prophet. Okay? You ready for this? I looked this up afterwards because I felt like God wanted me to. You ready? Ahab ruled between Ahab ruling, because Ahab is still in power. Before Jehu became king of Israel, it was another 33 years.
So God tells him something, but he has to wait 33 years for it. Oh my goodness.
And
isn't that just
between this 33 years, there was so much other stuff that happened.
Crazy.
See, you never know who or how you will help. You don't.
Right.
You know, Elijah went through a lot of things. It appeared that no matter how much he loved God or how much he was a messenger for God, bad things happened.
Right.
We have to understand that bad things are going to happen.
Right.
We have to understand that this world is in a mess.
Yep.
And sometimes when God is trying to get someone's attention, we have to suffer the consequences.
Yep.
It just depends on how much we love God. Let me ask you a rhetorical question. We all have family members out there that aren't serving God.
Right.
We all have family members out there that we would love for them to serve God and give their entire life and their entire heart and everything to God. Because it would be so much better for them and for the people around them.
Right.
But a lot of people are self-centered. Anyway.
Sean,
I'm sorry.
don't put yourself in it now.
Now listen, think about this for a minute. Wouldn't it be worth it? All of the pain,
Right? Amen. Yes, it would.
all living in a cave,
Yes.
all being fed by ravens.
Yeah.
If the people in our lives, the people that we love, would turn their lives over to
Right?
God, wouldn't it be worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be worth it? But don't you think Elijah looked and goes, why am I doing this? It's not going to do any good.
Because to him, it's like, what is this helping me exactly? But it's not
if
about
you
him.
understand something,
Right.
none of this helped Elijah.
No, it didn't.
Nothing he did was about him.
No, it wasn't about him.
That's our problem today.
Exactly.
Everything
Amen.
is about us.
Right.
Everything is about what I can get.
Right.
God is trying to get someone's attention today.
Amen. Mine.
Whether it's in this room, whether it's on the
Amen.
internet, we're going to have to suffer
do
the
that to me.
consequences.
Yeah.
God wants us to hold on until he can get accomplished what he needs to get accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Hopefully somebody out there in internet land saw some of this live, or we'll see it later on Andrea's Facebook. I am setting up a page to put all these Bible studies into a group, so you'll be seeing that group. It's going to be named after our old church, so people will know. Thank you everyone that's here, that showed up, that bothered to listen. And until next Sunday, we'll see everybody later.